Annalena Baerbock, welcome to 7:30.
Good evening. Thanks for having me on the show.
Congratulations on your election as president. You've called this General Assembly a make or break moment. What's at stake?
The future of our United Nations, which is actually our life insurance, because no country in the world would be better off without the United Nations. And there are many voices at the moment who say, well, if we see the wars going on in Gaza, incredible suffering, Ukraine, Sudan, Haiti, so why do we need the United Nations? But we have to make clear to ourselves that this institution was founded 80 years ago exactly on that purpose. When the times are difficult, we have to unite. We have to find the courage to strengthen this organization. And therefore, I set up the motto for the upcoming session of Better Together, showing that the United Nations are under pressure, financially, politically. But this is a moment where the countries around the world have to say, and this is why we stand up and deliver to our charter.
Australia, Canada and the UK have recognised a Palestinian state. France will do so later today. Can this move be anything more than symbolic?
Obviously, recognition doesn't mean an end of the suffering, and therefore the resolution by the 140 countries is calling for a pathway towards a two-state solution. What we need most, and this is a call from the member states, is a ceasefire, an unconditional ceasefire, which would allow humanitarian access to enter because people are literally starving. It would allow that hostages will be freed again because we saw at the last ceasefires that this was the moment when also the hostages being held captured by Hamas could go back to their beloved ones. And build on that one, there need to be diplomatic efforts to come to peace agreements, and the resolution makes also very clear that a right to the Palestinians is a right which belongs to all the members of the international community to have their own state. But it's also the responsibility that all the countries secure the security of Israel. So the laydown of weapons from Hamas, making clear that Hamas cannot rule Gaza, is a part of this pathway. So it's a very complex resolution, and obviously it's a hard way to go, but it's also the moment to show we are not giving up because we owe it to the people, especially with regard to the situation of the 2 million Palestinians and the hostages being still captured by Hamas.
At the same time, members of the Israeli government responded to those pledges to recognise a Palestinian state by actions to annex the West Bank, thereby destroying the prospect of a Palestinian state on the ground. Is the UN powerless in the face of this?
We have to understand always that the UN is 193 member states. So it's not the institution which is failing, but it's the will of these 193 member states. And if member states are being involved in these decisions, then obviously you don't have unity. We have many, many resolutions over decades that the only way to peace, to end this decade-long conflict between Israel and Palestine, is ending the war, is no further occupation, is no further terror. This is the only way to peace. This is the only way to have two states. And therefore, in my regard, this is also an important moment coming up on Monday when we do have this two-state solution conference. But obviously, the work will follow afterwards.
What impact does it have on the legitimacy of the UN when it is powerless to stop or even influence the conduct of a war that has exceeded the rights of a country to self-defense?
Well, I can only repeat myself because, as I said, it's never pointless. Even though, obviously, it has not been achieved that there is a ceasefire and neither a sovereign state of Palestine. But what we have achieved is at least that humanitarian aid could come in. So to put the question upside down again, if the conclusion would be then we won't need any UN anymore, this would also mean that there is no humanitarian assistance anymore. And then we would be even worse off. So this is my strong call, even in the darkest hours, and we have seen that in history. It's the moment, especially the responsibility for those countries who have the great chance to live in peace, not to give up, not to resign, but to try even harder. And we have seen it also in other conflicts, horribly long, for years, some of these conflicts. But then the moment came because diplomacy did not give up, and there was a pathway to peace. And this is exactly what I meant with we are at a crossroad. It's easier to resign. It's easier just to say, okay, then we are not trying anymore. But this would be the biggest failure in history. And our promise to 8 billion people around the world is that we try every day even harder.
Just a question about funding. How big a challenge is it for the United Nations at the moment to have the United States threaten its funding in the way that it's doing?
It's a huge challenge because the US has been the biggest donor for most of the time. So peacekeeping is depending heavily on the support, the World Food Programme. And in this regard, it's so important that we're having this reform because the truth is also that this organization could be more efficient. It is not at the state of art of a 21st century institution, so it's rightly so that the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, set up the reform process of UNAIDS. It's my role to support it with all the member states together, and also to remind every country, also the biggest countries in the world, that it's in their self-interest to keep up this institution, not only politically, but also financially, because peace and security is the best guarantee, life guarantee for every country, as I said, also with regard to the other challenges. So we are really at the crossroad to underline that we need the ongoing support politically and financially.
Is it a particularly potent moment to have a German as President of the United Nations, given when the UN was founded in the wake of Germany's war against the Jews and against Europe?
My country is thankful forever that Germany was accepted in the international community again. As you framed in your question, this institution was built on the horrors of the Second World War, on the genocide, built on a world where you thought this is hell. And one of the first Secretary General underlined, this institution is not made up for bringing humankind to heaven, but to prevent it from hell. And this is also a special responsibility of my country, that we are doing everything to make this world better. It won't be perfect, but to underline also with this presidency that we are not only committed to the Charter, but in times where the UN is under pressure, as I said, not only politically, but also financially, that we are supporting this institution, this Charter, wherever we can.
Should we have a female Secretary General of the United Nations? Would you like to see that?
Well, I think you can imagine what I would like to see, but it's not a question of my personal opinion. But you should rather ask the question, and it was not only me in my opening speech here as the only 5th president of the General Assembly out of 80, but it was also the membership in the last Pact of the Future, where they underlined that it's not a very normal situation that in 8 decades, the international community was not capable of finding one woman. We have potentially 4 billion candidates. So the question, who will be the face of this institution in the upcoming years, it's also a question of credibility if we are serving all the people around the world. And as we know, in every country, and this is something which unites everybody, half of the populations are women.
Just a question about Australia. Countries are bringing their 2035 emissions reductions targets to the UN. Australia's just announced its target. But as long as Australia is opening large new fossil fuel projects, can it be considered a responsible global player?
I'm not commenting on individual states, but what I can underline is that the world committed not only to peace and security, but also to fight the biggest security threat. And the climate crisis is the biggest security threat on Earth in this century. We see all around the world that we have parts already where people migrate because they can literally not live there anymore because of the drought and the heat. And this is also the moment where every country in the world should ask themselves if they are delivering on that one, the biggest security threat, the climate crisis, or fighting the climate crisis.
Annalena Baerbock, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks a lot and all the best.